Looks like still working hard. This last time we talked, it was the same background. So it's like it's one of those weird things in startup land where
Right,
the day changes, but it
right,
doesn't change.
right. Exactly. No, I do get out a little bit now. I go to innovation space and work out of there a day or two a week, and I'll work downstairs in my comfy chair for a while. But this is what's got the best video and audio setup.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, I do the old like when I need to go into flow state, I'll get on the couch and prop the computer up on the legs and just zoom in and zoom out sort of thing. So I
Exactly,
feel
exactly,
you. I
exactly.
feel you. Well, how's it been going since we chatted last? Looks like you got a launch or
Yeah,
beta or
we
what
launched.
what phase?
Yeah, we launched the product. I still say we're in like maybe more public beta now, where anybody can sign up.
Yeah,
Nobody does because have not distributed it widely. So I think
right.
I have out of my 100 customers, there've been like three people who have signed up who have not personally known. But that's okay, because in the beginning, it's ironing out the kinks and figuring out what's
Mhm.
working, what's not. The fact that we have 100 customers, less than a month in is quite phenomenal already, and we've been getting a lot of positive reception from folks who really understand the value of what we're bringing. So that's been encouraging, and yeah, it's also been figuring out next steps, which is distribution and next feature sets, and where do we crispen up the marketing and the value props to help people on board. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's really really good.
Well, you're in the mortgage space, so helping homeowners. I mean, that's pretty much every consumer. Well, not every consumer, but every human needs a place to live. So obviously your market size is big. But yeah, interesting. I mean, I forget, what's your background? Are you software engineering or more product side?
I'm actually a chemist by formal training. So my formal skills are in optimization
Mm,
and systems thinking. I always
yeah,
think about systems, holistically, not just a single problem. And I think that thinking is super valuable in the mortgage
yeah,
space because it's not actually one problem, right? It's a constellation of issues, which is, how do I get the best rate? How much do I put in my down payment? Do I buy
right.
discount points or not? How do I make sure my credit score is in the right place? Do I get a fixed rate or an adjustable rate? So that's sort of just on the origination side, right? You have to make a complicated set of problems, a complicated set of choices, and if you don't make them well, what ends up happening is you end up paying more, but you do it in a way that you don't notice because it's like, it's a one third of my paycheck. I'm just going to pay it and it's done. So I never have to think about this thing, right? But then
Mhm.
you'll sit there and optimize. Am I paying $15 more for a subscription? Am I spending too much
Yeah.
on Chick-fil-A? I was like, that shit really doesn't matter. What matters is, are you paying $1,000 or 1,500 or 2,000 your mortgage? If you optimize that, eat all the freaking fast food and binge on all the Netflix you want, and it will not affect your wealth.
Isn't it so funny? I mean, I want to talk to you about like how you went from chemistry to mortgages because that's an interesting leap. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah, what you said is so true. It's like I can buy a $500,000 house
yeah,
and $10,000 is a rounding error, and
yeah.
then I can beat up Netflix on their $2 a month price increase. And that's really what like pisses me off, right? So it's like this old reference pricing thing
Yeah,
is like such a huge thing that people just lose all aspect of like total dollar value, which is like a weird human behavior kink
correct.
that we have in our brains.
I think there's a little bit of price anchoring also going on, but there's
Yeah.
also, I think, I forget the term for it, where it's sort of like numbness to things that have happened for a long time, right? Just like you've had back pain for a long time, you become numb to it and just absorb it, even though it's quite painful. In financial pain, it's more just like a slow drip, right? One is like, I think I learned about that price anchoring thing in like from a Mercedes car salesperson, right? It's like, okay, you know what? I'm going to buy this car that's $45,000. Let me just add on these $600 weather mats. And you're like, yeah, that seems totally reasonable. It's like,
Yeah.
1% of the purchase price. Yeah, I'll add these weather mats. But would you ever go to a store and spend $600 on
No.
weather mats? Absolutely not. So,
No. You're never searching that on Amazon. Like, here, you know what I'm gonna do today? I'm gonna
yeah.
spend $600 on mats for my car. That's
So
ridiculous.
even though nominally it's an obscene cost because it's been made relative to the cost of the car itself. So I think that's a little bit of that for sure, which is sort of that anchoring to what you're being upsold relative to what you're buying. But I think the second piece is like you don't really think about the maintenance, right? Or the gas price, which is sort of a constant big drip.
Hmm.
You're sort of just anchored on like, yeah, I got the car. And I think that's sort of like the total cost of ownership. That's the word I was looking for. Like with
Yeah.
electric cars, my insurance cost in my Tesla is $55. 55.
Wait, that's your car insurance per month?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
insanely cheap because Tesla is self-insured. They give you a little driver score and then they drive they're giving you an economic incentive to drive better, right? Because you're like, oh, my score is 95, I got it up to 98. All the while they're able to drop the price, making you a better driver, and their margins are actually growing bigger as they're dropping price.
Right. It's
Uh,
nuts.
so that total cost of ownership, I'd say, is sort of the other frame in terms of like, you really need to think about the total loss of wealth that happens with a mortgage if you don't do it well.
Yeah. It's so true. I mean, it's like everything too. It's like life nickel and dimes you. I
Yeah,
used, I used to live in New York City, like downtown. Well, like in the city. There's no such thing as like downtown in New York City. Everything's pretty much downtown. Um, but I used to joke that every time I walked out of my apartment, I just had to hand somebody $100 bill. Like, because it's just so expensive to live there. And I'm sure like the Bay Area too, as well. It's like so nasty. But yeah, any like major metropolitan center, it's insane. And then like inflation, groceries go up, you don't notice it. Gasoline goes up, you don't notice it. The price of milk. I was talking to this dude the other day. I mean, this is a whole different tangent, like things you deal with just from like a home. Uh, Here, I'll tell you. So all of a sudden, my AC stops working last week, and
right,
it's like almost 100 degrees here. So in, I don't know, 4 hours, it went from like 70 degrees Fahrenheit to
right.
85 degrees, and I've got two dogs, and it was really bad. So I'm like, what's going on? So I had to call the repairman. Luckily, they came out pretty quickly, take a look at the HVAC. So they're doing their thing, right? They look at the machinery outside, they come inside, they look at the electrical box, then they go up into the attic. And I'm on a conference call at the time, so I can't check it out. So I end early, I go downstairs and I talk to the two guys, and they're like, they pull open their phone. And then they're like, here, you need to see this. And they like show me a picture on the phone. Up in the attic, in the ductwork, that's like, there's the stuff with like I don't know what you call it. It's almost like reflective gray material
Yeah,
insulation around tin ducts that produce the airflow. Somebody at some point in the last 2 years since I've had this house cut a 1 foot by 1 foot hole in it, left the top off and to the side. So all summer, I've been cooling our attic, and to the point where it just like blew up the machinery because it was overloaded. So luckily they were nice enough. They fixed it up for me. They like replaced this piece of machinery I have. Not ideal, didn't want to spend the money, but I'm just like, are you kidding me? Like my electric bill was up. I would have had no idea unless something would have happened and gone up there. And it's just like, what is happening in the world? Like, can we trust anybody to just not mess up your stuff, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. It's the mortgage, funny enough, is exactly like that. There's a big gaping hole through which you're losing money, monthly, and like, it's just you don't notice it, right? So it just happens. You don't notice this big thing that's happening. Yeah, totally. Makes sense. That's
Yeah.
crazy. That's
So how
crazy
did
that you left it open. Yeah.
how did you get from chemistry to where you are now? Like what's that? It was a couple steps, I'm sure. You didn't just wake
Yeah.
up
So
one day in the lab and you're like, you know what? H2O? I don't think so. Mortgage-backed securities, here we come.
Funnily enough, I worked a lot on H2O in my chemistry PhD, not specifically water, but oxygen. So we breathe oxygen, and it's the body's terminal electron receptor. So basically, your body is not running a battery; it's running more of a fuel cell. And the difference between the two is, when a battery runs out of juice, you have to recharge it. It's a closed
Yeah.
system where basically to recharge it. In a fuel cell, which is also an electrical system, you don't recharge, you refuel. So it's sort of like it's an open system. If a battery were an open system, it would be called a fuel cell, which basically you put in fuel, it runs an electrochemical circuit, which is you still make the electrons and you run it through a circuit, right? It's not combustion. So for a fuel cell, you also need an oxidant. So fuel cell and batteries both need oxidants. And what the oxidant does is when the electron, you take the fuel, you make an electron, run across the circuit, you get electricity. At the other end of that circuit, the electron has to go somewhere. So it goes to an oxidant. That oxidant in most batteries is like calcium oxide, magnesium oxide, basically some version of oxygen. So the same reason why we need oxygen, batteries and fuel cells also need an oxidant. Oxygen is an oxidant, but there are other oxidants. So what I was building was, can I, instead of using an oxidant like calcium oxide and magnesium oxide in a battery or a fuel cell, can I just straight up use oxygen like how we use? And the
Yeah.
reason to do that is because batteries are like one half fuel, other half oxidant, and then there's your electrolyte, right? But a bunch of it is just like, it's not wasted, but it's not fuel.
Yeah. You're
So
wasting space.
you're wasting space, exactly. So if you replace the oxidant in a battery with literal oxygen, in the same amount of space, you can have twice as much fuel. The result is the same battery can go twice as long,
Yeah.
or you need half as much battery to go the same distance. In fact, it's a little bit less than half, because the problem with the battery is to go further, you need to add more battery, which is also more weight. So, adding more battery has declining utility over, the more you add, it's not like a linear function. It sort of
Yeah.
like lines off because you're adding weight as well.
It's like rocket fuel. The more you fill up the rocket ship with fuel, the heavier it gets, the more fuel you need, and then to infinity. Yeah.
Exactly. It's just that, it's like, is the juice worth the squeeze, right? So in this case, it's like I'm trying to take out, weight, so then it can just, go further. So that's what I worked on my PhD is, can I use oxygen instead of, metal oxides in batteries and fuel cells to run the circuit?
So wait, so let's go back to the human body, because this is fascinating for me. I like took a couple classes in chemistry,
Yeah.
like some of the equation stuff, because I was a math background, like worked for me, but I just didn't go deep into the chemistry area. So you said the human body, right? Like water, and you compared it, not a battery, more like a fuel cell. But you said like the battery, the energy level depletes and then needs to be, quote, plugged back in, add more energy into the system.
Correct.
Isn't that what we're doing with oxygen and water anyways, is we have to continue keep adding more of that fuel into the system?
So
Or
no.
what's the difference? Help me understand the difference there.
Yeah. So the difference is in our body's an open system, so it'd be more comparable to a fuel cell, not a battery. The battery and fuel cells. So this is the difference in battery and fuel cell is the similarities. They're both electrochemical systems, which means you're not burning anything. You're running a chemical reaction and creating electricity out of that, right? The difference between battery and fuel cell is a fuel cell is open, where when you run out of juice, you open it up, you put in ethanol or whatever, and then you sort of refuel and go, but it's still running an electrical motor. It's not a combustion. It's not combustion. So that's the difference between battery and fuel cell. Battery is you recharge, fuel cell is you refuel, which is totally different than combustion engine, which is you refuel, but then you combust, which is you're creating controlled explosions. There's no electrochemical process running. It's just like you're literally setting shit on fire. Batteries and fuel cells don't set shit on fire.
So it's the reaction stage. So I think I was getting caught up in the analogy where you have to add more stuff to an existing system to keep the system running.
Exactly. That's a fuel cell. Yeah.
The
That's
difference is the reaction state that powers. One is
correct.
electricity, the other one. I mean, that's the whole thing. Like I did this visit number of years ago to SpaceX.
Yeah.
And the thing that really got me when I walked through there, and this goes to the combustion engine thing, is I'm like, basically the only difference between this and a car is it's just size. Like you just have a much larger explosion, but literally all we're doing is lighting something on fire,
Yeah.
blowing it up, and then directing it in one direction so the thing moves in the other direction.
No, so both of them are combustion. You're right. A rocket is combustion and your car is combustion. So there, the similarity is how the power is generated, but the difference
Mhm.
is one is thrust, which is
Yeah.
basically literally the exhaust leaving that's creating it. The
Yeah.
other one is you're converting the explosion, with a crankshaft from like linear to circular, and the mechanism of conversion of that energy is so they're sort of like, oh, if you draw a Venn diagram, like electric car and gasoline car work in the same way in terms of like you're moving something, in case a motor
Mhm.
or crankshaft, to move the motion, but the
Yeah.
source of energy can either be combustion or it can be electricity. So there's some overlap, but yeah, my favorite sort of like acronym for combustion is like suck, squeeze, bang, blow, right? You think it's a porno, but it's like you suck in the oxygen, or suck in the air,
Yeah.
then you put in that case, there's a spray of fuel, then you squeeze it, which is the compression, stroke, then you combust it, which in case of a engine, with a petrol engine, you'll have a spark plug, or diesel is just the pure compression itself that creates the self ignition. And
Right.
then blow is the exhaust phase. But yeah, both sort of, you know, rockets, or, like turbo, like a jet engine is the same suck, squeeze, bang, blow, which is
Mhm.
also the same in a car, but its expression is different with but the stages are the same. You're right.
Yeah. Yeah, you just push it onto machinery and then
Yeah,
convert it into a controlled process to wheels because you don't want
exactly.
to scrape your car along the bottom of a freeway. It's harder to control.
Exactly. But yeah,
But
it's
the
crazy. It's controlled explosion.
I mean, the thing that got me is it was like, man, we're still back in Neanderthal years. Like, where's the quantum leap? And I get that I'm not a rocket science or some genius or something, but like, I do this like weird weekend research on like gravity drives and things like that, right? It's like a leap. It's
Yeah.
like we need some sort of quantum leap because we can't just keep making rocket fuel and pointing to like big explosions. Like that's just not going to scale well. I mean, it's like, what is the better approach? And then you go out in space and there's no friction. So let's just put a laser beam or, photons and just keep hitting a wall over and over again a bajillion times and it'll just increase our speed faster and faster. And it's like, I just feel like we're missing something as a species,
Yeah.
and I don't know. This took a weird turn.
No, 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 no worries. So anyway, so you said, how did I get from like, from chemistry to mortgages? So
Yeah.
my discovery in chemistry is like, so I'm a systems thinker. I think about like, hey, what molecules would you have to make that take oxygen and convert into water? The problem with oxygen going to water is it happens, like oxygen always converts to water, but it has a very high kinetic barrier, which means if oxygen is here and water
Mhm.
is here, thermodynamically the reaction will happen. It's just that it has a high kinetic barrier, so you have to go over a big hump to get
Mhm.
there. And what a catalyst does is it reduces that barrier, so you go from oxygen to water very quickly, and that's what you need to
Interesting.
do for oxygen to replace and replace all that space in a battery. But the reason that is tough is the reason why humans exist. Because if oxygen had no kinetic barrier, instead of we would just burn up, right? The fact that oxygen has a kinetic barrier, because you think about, if you go into a room filled with oxygen, you light a match on fire,
Yeah.
everything just goes up in flames. But
Yeah.
the reason we don't go up in flames is, one, the concentration is low, but also because oxygen has a very high barrier. You literally have to climb up a very big hill to go down a mountain. And what I was working on is reducing that size of the mountain in a controlled way to get to it. But a long way to say, the thing that I really learned out of my PhD is it's very difficult to come up with an answer just by thinking about it and trying shit. The way it works in lab, nowadays is you'll just come up with an idea, you'll make it and test it, right?
Hmm.
It's an incredibly inefficient way of finding the answer,
Yeah.
right? Even if you have good hypotheses. So my big learning in my PhD was I can use computers to do a shit ton of work, right? I can model these systems, what I call, in silico, and
Hmm.
then you say, hey, which system is performing well, right? Which system seems to be lowering that barrier? And then once I find, like, instead of making 10 things in lab, I would make 10 things instead of making 10 things in the lab over 1 year, I would make 10 things in the computer in 1 month, and then go make 4 things in the lab over the next 3 months. And my hit rate was like 2 or 3 times X, right? Just because
Yeah.
I would filter out using computational work instead of my physical work.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it
from
makes
there,
sense. I
yeah,
mean, use a computer to run a bunch of hypothesis tests and simulations, and then just use the ones that seem promising, and
exactly.
then go
So
work on those with the human brain.
exactly. So then, I fell in this love with ideas like, can you combine computational work with empirical work? Chemists are like a divided faction. They're either a computational chemist or they're synthetic chemist. Like they're like, I'm this type of chemist. I'm like, you're an effing chemist. Like what? Who cares? You're trying to solve a problem. Solve the problem. Who cares what type of chemist you're? Right. So they usually like won't collaborate. And luckily, my buddy was just sitting, the next door over. He was a computational chemist, and I was like, hey man, what are you doing? Like show me, like what are these, Gaussian distributions that you're running and how do you model this? And he would show me, and I was like, this is effing awesome. Like, I will do this. And he's like,
Yeah.
why would you do this? I'm like, well, because it helps me make better things in lab.
Yeah.
Uh, but anyway, so the big takeaway there was, how can you combine physical work with computational work to come up with a better answer, right? I sort of fell in love with that idea. And I also realized that this shit moves too slow. I applied to Tesla, like, didn't even get like a job interview or anything. There was a much smaller company back then. Um, so then I left, academia is too slow. I want to go learn business. I did not have money to, go learn business, so I would just go audit classes in the business school. And yeah, I learned about like McKinsey, people would say, oh, this is this great management consulting firm. You can like, they do XYZ, they're the bee's knees and they talk to like presidents. I was like, this sounds interesting, like I'll do
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
So I figured out my way how to get, a job interview at McKinsey. And funnily enough, they were the only company that interviewed me that also sponsored visas. I'm an immigrant. I
Yeah.
had like a student visa at the time. And I was like, shit, man, I got to get this job. Otherwise, I got to leave, you know? Um, so I ended up getting the job, and ended up working there for like 7 years. And I sort of continued on this thread of like, how do you combine chemistry with computers to make better decisions? But the
Yeah.
decisions I helped make there was for clients in mining, refining, chemical processes. And the idea
Yeah.
was the same, like, I have a bunch of knobs to tune in a plant, right? There are like 10 knobs, and people can only think about 3 knobs. And I was
Yeah.
like, can you combine machine data
Yeah.
with chemical knowledge to say, should the pressure be 71 psi or
Hmm.
72? Should the temperature be like 88 or 88.4? And just come up with more precise recommendations in a plant setting to make more of whatever you're making, or to do it at a cheaper cost or with less material.
Hmm.
That's what I did for a number of years, is just helping people make better decisions in these like gigantic plants that were making like, $2 million of copper every day, or like, a few $1 million of gold every day. And they're, like 0.1%, right? Of like, 2 million
Yeah.
bucks is $20,000.
Like IoT optimization. What year? Like about what year was this?
So this was, I started
2010s?
McKinsey in 2015, and I would say I did some work in IoT as well. But so I actually didn't. People think of like a job as like one thing. I did like 5 different things. And one of the years I did IoT, but
Yeah.
then next year, then I did like data science, data engineering. The year after that, I combined them, right? Because IoT gives you the data, but then you have to apply some data engineering to structure the data, and data science to come up with a better
Yeah.
decisioning system. So it was like, 2015 was like I just learned about how McKinsey works, right? 2016 was like I like worked at a mine for the first time. I was like, hey, what the heck is this? 2017 was like, learning about IoT and data and such. But 2018 is when I really helped build out the system at, one of the biggest copper and gold producers in the country.
That's incredible. That's so cool. Yeah, it's such like interesting knowledge, but also the fact that I mean McKinsey's like Major League Baseball. Like you went from like college to like Major League Baseball, playing in the rooms and businesses of, at the top of the charts. Like they are like the number one strategy consulting firm, and like the BC,
Gee,
BCG friends and the Bain friends are gonna like send me hate mail. But yeah, that was good for you, man. And cool that they sponsored the visa too. That's surprising. So
you know,
like
it's
you
not
didn't,
it's not it's not surprising, right? It's actually an incredibly good HR strategy, right? Because if you think about, how much McKinsey consultants get paid, and at last check, like starting salary was like still like right out of MBA is like 160 plus, right? If you're paying that much, the cost of sponsoring H1B is like maybe 10 grand, even if you have like really fancy lawyers, right? Maybe 15, right?
yeah,
So relative to what you're paying them, it's like less than 10%. Relative to what you're billing them out for is probably closer to $1 million a year. It's like,
yeah.
1%, right? Not even.
Well,
Um,
that's why I was saying not that it was surprising McKinsey did, surprising that others did not.
oh, right, right. Yeah, that's sort of a very, if you have a very like nationalist or populist agenda, and you're like, this is more trouble than it's worth. It tells you like where your values are with respect to
Yeah,
HR, right? Like
true.
Wayfair, right? They just like it's like they treat their employees like their furniture, right? It's sort of like use and throw, like So you really want to treat your people well always, because ultimately, companies just like a bunch
Agree.
of people trying to do the same thing, right? So if you don't treat your
Uh-huh.
people well, you know,
Yeah, companies don't exist without talent. Like,
yeah.
period. It's nothing. It's just an empty shell. Like that's the thing that got me. Like I started my career for working with big HR capital consulting firms. Like it's now called Willis Towers Watson. Um,
Okay.
and so like PwC, I was an actuary back in the day,
Oh,
and then
nice.
did incentive design for the big companies. So yeah, it was like, I mean, a couple 100-year-old HR consulting firm. So like it just, man, when I like started going deeper into the rest of the world of business and startups, I'm just like looking around, like it was so weird. It was jarring. It was like people don't care about people, like. And then now I just see so many companies that are doing this yo-yo hiring, like let's hire 1,000 people and then lay them off tomorrow. And I'm like, you guys are destroying your brand, man. If I was in that boardroom, I'd be like, ooh, this is not a good way to run a business. This isn't good. This is gonna come back and bite you. So yeah, I'm with you.
Um, yeah, like ultimately it's like, there's like a set of people and there's like a mission, and then you sort of how do you keep people happy and working towards that mission, right? So yeah, so McKinsey is really good from that way in terms of taking care of their people. Like when I left, they gave me like 4 or 5 months of like paid time. I had like an army of consultants that got assigned to me to help me find a job. And I was like, but they weren't like picking up that I didn't want to do a job. I was starting a company. you know, I would have rather loved was like, $100,000 in seed fund and like a whole bunch of like, entrepreneurial consultants. So I
That's
think
interesting.
the typical exit path out of McKinsey is, you take like a high-powered job in corporate America and then hire
Yeah,
back the firm, as a client. So they're
yeah.
all about that. But the I was even like, can I even incorporate while I'm still on this like paid time off? And there wasn't a clear answer, so I just waited till I fully left
Interesting.
incorporated. Yeah.
I think you just identified the new growth strategy for the consulting firms. Because that's their innovation practice now is like ex-consultants start companies, grow them, build out technology, hire them back later, partnerships with big corporates. Like,
Yeah.
there you go. There you go. There it is. All right. So, anyways, okay. So you did chemistry PhD, nothing to shake a stick at. Then you went McKinsey, definitely nothing to shake a stick at. Then you like built out mining software, pretty rad. Then you decided to start your company. Was that this company?
Yeah, this company, it started with when I bought this house. We bought the house in 2020, right at like the
Mm,
pandemic had just settled in. There was a momentary freeze in the market, where
yeah.
everyone's like,
Yep.
nobody's ever going to buy homes again. And I
Yep.
was like, we're probably going to be stuck in a house for a while. My son was 1 and starting to run around our, 2-bedroom apartment. I was like, I'd just gotten like a recent promotion. I'd made junior partner in McKinsey. I was like, let's just do it. So I went out, looked at a house, showed my wife. It was very quick. We put the offer and got accepted. And then I got into this like scheme, this like scheme of a mortgage. And I just like, it was so insane to me that me with like a PhD, like McKinsey consultant, and I was like, I know my math. And it was like utterly confusing. I was like,
Yeah.
what the heck is this? I'm signing up for a very large amount of debt. I don't quite understand all these terms. Like what is the difference between, a promissory note versus a deed of trust? I was like, a deed of trust is not something you should trust. You're telling somebody that you're going to give over, in a non-judiciary state such as Texas, without any courtroom proceeding. You're giving consent for them to just take your house and sell it if you miss a mortgage payment or two. You should not trust a deed of trust,
Yeah.
But I was just like furiously Googling what are all these like terms and disclosures and what these numbers meant. And it all really started with a very simple question. And the question was, how long should my mortgage be? And the mortgage broker was like, what, it's 15 or 20, right? I'm like, no, but like 15, I get it, I can't afford it. But 30 is insanely long. Like I'm like 32 years old. Like, basically if somebody had gotten a mortgage when I was born, they would have just paid it off. This is
Yeah.
ridiculous, right? 30
Right.
is like insanely long. And
And all the interest that you pay.
yeah, the interest you pay, it's like people think that, oh, it's, like it's just 5%. But if you take a home that costs 5% in interest, you will pay almost the same
Yeah.
amount in interest as the size of your loan. So on a
Yeah.
$500,000 loan, you'll pay 465 grand in interest, or
Mm.
like almost $1 million in total by the time you're done.
Yeah. You paid for two homes by the
Yeah,
time you paid for your one, which is
exactly.
nuts.
Which
And
is
you're right. I mean, it's insane. I mean, the only reason that, I mean, it's just insane. The sheer amount of money
yeah,
and the fact that so many people in the world like are in this system is
right.
like mind-boggling to me. The fact that it even exists where you can just like roll up to like some bank you've never talked to or met or some person you've never met and they're like, yeah, here's like hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then yeah, all this fine print. And then I remember just the mortgage paperwork because it was my first home too, and it was like the United States government and like 9/11 stuff. And I'm just like, dear God, this is scary. Like, what is this? And everyone's like, all the brokers and the real estate agents are like, hurry, hurry, hurry. We got like 10 days to close. And they're just like pushing you. And then they just keep throwing stuff at you a day before you close. And you're like, what is this racket? Like, the whole thing is just not good. The fact that it exists and is still standing on these
Right,
toothpick stilts
right.
is insane to me. Like,
Yeah,
how is this system even operating today?
yeah, yeah. There's a lot to unpack there, but I'll give you like two nuggets. The first nugget is, after 1930s, like some of the modern amortizing mortgage came around in the 1930s after the Great Depression, where essentially, there was a before that mortgages used to be like bullet or balloon mortgages, which you would take it for 5 years and then the entire loan would be due at the end of the fifth year. At the Great Depression, when these loans came due, nobody could afford to pay them off. So it wasn't like uh, people weren't insolvent, like they had money, but it was like a liquidity issue. They didn't have the money to pay the full amount, right? Because all of it came due at the same amount. So what FDR did is, with the Federal Housing Administration, is made loans fully amortizing. And the word amort means to kill. Funny enough, the word mortgage, mort means death, and gage means like pledge or agreement. So it is a literal agreement until death, which is sort of like, funny and morbid, I guess, to think about.
Yay. Let's take
But
something like our home and just put
well,
that.
technically speaking, by law, mortgage is it's an agreement until the death of the loan. So basically,
Yeah.
you're agreeing to pay the loan back until it dies, not until you die. But that's the sort of terminology. But amortization is another big like fleecing of the American public, right? And what amortization does is it says I'm going to pay all the interest that I own on this home this month, right? So interest on a mortgage is actually simple interest. Most people think it's compound interest. Is actually purely simple interest. So on a $500,000 loan, right, if your interest rate was, let's say, 6%, right? 6% divided by 12 is half a percent.
Mhm.
Half a percent of 500,000 is 2,500 bucks. So you'll pay 2,500 bucks this month. Plus, a small portion of principal such that your loan balance goes to zero over the duration of the loan. So it's simple interest paid in full every month, plus a small balance that depends on n being how long the loan is.
Yeah.
That concept in itself is okay, because what you're saying is your loan will never be due in full, you'll pay it off slowly over time. But in reality, the way it works out is you end up paying your loan back asymmetrically. And what I mean by that is halfway through the loan, you might think 15 years in, I've paid off 15% of 50% of my loan amount. What you've actually paid off is like 32%.
Yeah.
So they screw you by, introducing this asymmetry where instead of following this linear glide path to paying it off, you follow this like sublinear glide path. And in itself, that's not bad, right? Because what FDR wanted to do is he wanted to give people a portion of the American dream. They buy houses, you have the financing boom, right? Because whenever you're in a recession, what do? You print money. And
Yeah.
mortgage way of printing money because they indebt people. And Woodrow Wilson was the first person who came up with the idea of like the American dream, because he wanted to move Americans away from this idea of like communist thinking and say you got to own a piece of America and then you'll be less communist in your thinking. So it's like a little bit of like government planning on how mortgages came to be and the financing boom came to be. But anyways, the amortizing loan came around in the 30s, and from then what happened as we've gotten to 100 years later, nobody stays for 30 years. You move every 10.
Yeah.
What happens is in 10 years, instead of having a third, you actually have like less than 20%, and then you move, and then you do 10 years again, and then you do 10 years again. So in 30 years, you this story plays out. Instead of owning 100%, you end up owning only like 50 to 60%, and your mortgage ends up lasting 50 years, right? And like 10 million retirees still have a mortgage because they're stuck in this like what I think of as a debt trap, right? It's sort of this promise,
Yeah. It's
it's sort of
true.
turned into a trap.
Yeah. It's so true. It's like, yeah. I mean, it's super scary. And especially for our generation too, where it's like we are totally on our own. I just don't feel like Social Security is going to be there. We're going to be on our own with healthcare. The population isn't going to be as big. We're going to have to be more productive.
Correct.
Pensions have gone away. 401k match, great, but the stock market is insane. And like,
Correct.
why? So it's like literally every man, woman, and child for themselves.
Correct.
And yeah, so it's like you almost have to operate your life as like a high performing athlete. And like who has time, knowledge, energy? Like most people have a couple kids, they got a job, they got like groceries, like exhausted at the end of the day. Like
Correct.
help me. you know?
Exactly, and that's sort of one of the thesis of why I formed the company. I was like, look, I'm a you know good smart person, and it's insane to like figure out how to deal with a mortgage. And my answer was like, my mortgage should be 23 years and 7 months. And they're like, what the f are you talking about? I'm like, no, look, I did the sensitivity analysis. As the mortgage gets shorter, I end up saving hundreds of thousands of dollars, but my payment only goes up very little, right? Because the longer the loan you go, your payment doesn't go down that much, right? So you basically, what you want to do is keep shortening the loan as long as you can afford it, and you get a really great ROI. So I figured this out, and I told this guy, like, look, I want a mortgage that's 23 years and 7 months. They just laughed at me.
You gave him the exact mathematical answer.
I gave him the exact, and there is an exact mathematical answer for everyone, because at 23 years and 7 months, like literally my payment was 10% more. But right, even back of the envelope, I was saving like 90 grand. I have a sizable mortgage, but relatively speaking, was still like a 23-year mortgage, right? So I'm paying 10% more, and my mortgage is getting done like at least 20% earlier. So even from that perspective, right, 10% more for 20% earlier, I will take that 2-for-1 deal any day.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. And it's enough time period for you to catch up in earnings or whatever it takes in order
Correct.
to do it. And then you save, I mean, 7 years in the grand scheme of a life isn't that much, but the amount of money that you save, as that compounds over time could be a lot. I mean,
Yeah,
that could be tuition, like college tuition for one of your kids.
it's not cost. You don't even need compounding. So there's the reason you pay it off quicker is because of compounding. So let's say you put $300 in, right? You put $300 in your first. Let's just do $100 because it's an easy number. When you put $100 into your mortgage, even at 5%, guess how much that's worth in 30 years?
Yeah.
Take a wild guess. It's $447 at 5%, because it's 5% that's compounding for 30 years, right? So if you think $5 times 30 is 150, so naively you might say, oh, 250, right? But with compounding, you're like, maybe it's 300, right? Maybe it's more than that. But it's 5% compounding,
Yeah.
and we don't think in J curves. And the second thing is it's risk-free and tax-free, because your note dictates if you put $100 more, your interest will be $5 less. There's no debate about it. Just it's pure math.
Yeah.
And the second thing is it's risk-free, which means or it's tax-free, which is if you were to get like a bond that yielded 5% each year, and they gave you a $5 payment, you would owe taxes on that $5.
Yeah.
But because you're saving that money relative to what you would have spent, it's basically tax-free. So it's really like you really made $7, not five, when you put money into your own mortgage. So it's an insane deal for most people, and the benefit is, yeah, you compound away your mortgage, but those remaining 7 years, if your mortgage payment was, let's say, $2,000 or $3,000, you opened up $3,000 of cash flows when your kids are right about to go to college, right?
Right.
$3,000 of cash flow is $36,000 or $100,000 of cash flow that you opened up in the last 7 years, and all it took you to get there was probably like $20,000 to $25,000 of extra payments over 20 years. So
Yeah.
the contribution is minimal, the benefits are huge.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. I mean, we talked about this last time, because what's the average household income in the United States is somewhere between, I mean, I've looked at GDP figures recently at the end of last year, but then
Sure.
also some of the reporting, it's somewhere between like $55,000 and $75,000 a year.
Sure.
So the problem, I feel like the biggest problem is living paycheck to paycheck. Like, we just don't have the extra disposable income. Is already a stretch to get into this house so we could,
Sure.
have like a family, have a place to call our own. We're not in
Sure.
an apartment. So it's like, to me, that is like the biggest headwind of you getting this thing out in the market, because I completely agree with you. And I even have a little bit of disposable income, and I'm not paying extra on it because I'm a different breed. It's like, okay, I'm going to put stuff over here and I think I can get a better return. So I'm
Sure.
playing like the return game. So it's a little
Sure.
bit different. I have more time. I don't have kids, so I'm a little bit different of a user. But like, how do you like what? And I feel like this is the big unlock for you and your business. If you can figure out a way, not just to sort of like get that message across where it makes a lot of sense. I think it's generally knowledge is like, if I pay off sooner, obviously I save a bunch of money. I don't know exactly, but then
Right.
the question is, how do I do that?
Yeah. So I have two answers for that.
Okay,
So,
you
another
got
problem,
two.
another problem with mortgages, like people just take a single problem view, right? And I always think about like it's a multi-level
Yeah,
problem. So another problem is refinancing, right? Everybody thinks refi is great because I lower the rate, lower the cost of capital, my monthly payment goes down. But what people don't think about is when you refi, you also start back in year one. So if you're 3 years in, yeah, you refi down by, 0.5%, but then your mortgage became 10% longer, right? So you can actually end up paying more interest. It's just that, it's like they're nickeling and diming, and it's like death by 1,000 cuts, right?
right.
What you want to do, there are two things you do there is when you lower the rate, maintain your same schedule, which is if you're in year three, stay in year three, because I'll come back to, the bozo told me I couldn't do 23 and 7. I'm absolutely on a 23 and 7. I'm actually on like an 18-year schedule right now. But you can absolutely stay where you are. You stay put. And what that does is your monthly payment went down, right? Because previously, let's say you're paying 2,500, the rate went down 0.5%. Now your payment is like 2,350. So you opened up $150 of cash flow. Use that to pay your mortgage faster, right? Because it's not hurting your pocket. You have refinanced, opened up cash flows, and in fact, you could even distribute that. Say, you keep $100 extra for yourself because you're living, very tightly, and use the extra money that I'm helping you open up to pay off your mortgage faster. So it's a win-win.
So what about now though, when interest rates are rising again after falling for so long? Because what
Correct.
if you refied, wouldn't you be refining at a higher amount? And so it's like a double whammy.
Correct. No, you wouldn't. You would never refi into a higher rate like that. That doesn't make sense. You could do a cash out refi if you have a ton of equity and trying to pull it out. But when you're
Right.
trying to cash out in a higher interest rate environment, you definitely don't want to use a cash out refi, because that refinances the entire mortgage balance, right? Because if you have $300,000 of mortgage balance, $100,000 of equity, you're at 3%, you go to 5%, you just insanely shot yourself in the foot. So what you
Yeah.
would do there is you would take a home equity line of credit. It would be at 5%, but it would be at 5% just for the 100 grand.
Got it.
And that's still
But
insanely cheap relatively to any other cost of financing. But that doesn't work. Yeah. So my strategy of helping people pay off their mortgage faster doesn't work in a rising rate environment for people who have low rates. But there's also now 15% of the population that has rates above 5%. So for those folks, it would be really helpful.
got it.
So yeah, that answer doesn't help everybody, but it would help those 15%. Now there's
Okay.
a second answer. So yes, it sounds like I'm helping people, asking people to put more money relative to where they are. But what I also can help do is help people get into a home with a lot less money. And what I mean by that is most people think about, hey, I'm going to put 20% down, to avoid PMI and to get the best rate. I help a lot of, my folks get in with 10.1% down. So I
Mm.
just opened up hypothetically 10%, right? If your home was 300,000, 10% of that is 30,000. You were planning on putting 60,000 down. I'm saying, you know what? Let's just put 30,000 down, right?
Yep.
And check this out. I will get you a better rate than what you were going to get. I potentially could eliminate PMI, and your monthly payment could be lower in spite of having a higher mortgage balance.
Yeah. Isn't PMI 20%?
To get rid of PMI, yeah, you need 20%. But
Yeah.
let me explain how you would get rid of all those things. So, but is that clear that you can get into a home a lot earlier with a lower down payment
Yeah.
and lower your rate? And the way
Yeah.
you lower your rate is you would use 1 to 2%. So let's say 10% down, right? Then let's use 2% more to buy down your rate. So if your rate was at 5.5%,
Yeah.
you
Pay the
could buy down
points.
your rate all the way to 4.5%. So now, in spite of you having a loan that is 10% bigger because of the rate arbitrage, you can end up in a situation where you're cash flow positive, both on a monthly basis and from a down payment. So the way I think about it is like you get in at 10% and then use that money which you would have otherwise just parked in a asset that's not producing, and sort of pay a little drip from that, the $100, $200. You have 30,000. I know it's a hypothetical 30,000 because most people probably don't have it. But if you compare it relative to that scenario, you're always cash positive.
Yeah. Yeah, I think situation two is a really smart one. I mean, that's what we did is just pay we just did a really low down payment. And then I mean, we took a different approach. We took some of that extra cash and then had to do renovations because
Yeah,
the house was so old. So then you get that in, and then with the rising price points, like the return on that was much better. And then it's like way better than the stock market for sure.
exactly, right. Because the problem with the stock market is you're not getting a leverage return, right? With home equity, right? If you go in with 10%, the home prices rises 10% in 2 years. That's
Hmm.
100% return on equity, right? You put
Yeah.
10% down, and the home price went up 10%. It's a
And
two.
and and stocks can go to zero. Typically, your home doesn't go to zero because it provides tangible. It has more intrinsic value than just a security.
Correct. And the other thing to think about it, you have to think about it from a portfolio perspective, right? Like people always think, oh, like why would I put money in my mortgage? Do I not just put it in stocks? And the first thing is like, look, you from a portfolio perspective, it's all about risk adjusted return of your
Mhm.
overall
Yeah,
portfolio. And the thesis here is you're just under allocated on your mortgage, which really hurts you for 30 years. If you're putting away at 2 grand, it's all about like, can you put away 200 in your mortgage that'll really help you out in hundreds of thousands? It's not like if that's all you have, by all means, put in your 401k, pay off high interest debt, put in the stock market. But 100, $200 really makes a huge difference. Just like a small down payment and getting into a home makes a
yeah,
huge difference, both from quality of life and return on equity.
yeah.
Similarly, like contributing a marginal amount has huge economic value.
I completely agree with the whole risk-adjusted return thing and just the whole premise at large. I think it's super smart. I mean, if you have $1 of disposable income, like actually disposable after you've paid for all the other living expenses, entertainment, whatever the case may be, then the question is, what is the best place I can put that extra dollar? And people will look at stocks, their 401k, and that's primarily where it stopped. Now younger generation is going straight crypto, but that's super volatile and that can definitely go to zero.
Yeah,
And you can keep it in cash, which has a lot of benefit, but you're losing money every day to inflation. And
Yeah.
so it's really comes down to like, where's the safest place that I can put it where I also have upside? It's like for me, the place I've gotten to is like, because Warren Buffett, what's the number one rule of investing? You ask the best investors in the world. Number one rule of investing: don't lose money.
Yeah.
Number two rule of investing: see rule number one. Number three rule: see rule number one. I mean, it's that important. So it's like, where do I put it where I don't lose money? Where you don't lose money and you get continued value is like water, food, like shelter, your home. And
Yeah.
then home, I think, to your point, like a dollar you put in there, you look at it as an investment decision for your future self.
Yeah.
You're paying your future self instead of like, you're basically removing debt and stress from your future self and your future family,
Correct.
is the way that I see it, which I think is
Absolutely.
really interesting.
And most people actually do think that way, right? Because nobody wants to have a mortgage forever. But I
Yeah.
think most people don't realize how little effort it takes in terms of like economic sacrifice to put that 100, $200 in to really get the value out. So I think
Mm.
people sort of, because most people don't want a mortgage, right? I think what people don't understand is amortization and how a mortgage screws you, how moving screws you, how refinancing screws you. So really what you want to, what I'm trying to do is take a customer centric view of how
Yeah.
loans should be managed, and also take a multi-decade view, right? Because it's not like you don't get the instant gratification, when you do this thing. And there are also other things. So I think two issues: that when you do put money in your mortgage, one problem is you don't have it. It's not liquid, so you can't take it back out. So I'm trying to solve that by attaching like a HELOC card and say, you put the money, yeah. Once you get to a certain amount, you should be able to take it out, because it also solves your cash problem, right? If you have $10,000 parked in an emergency account and you're one of these Dave Ramsey followers, um, that $10,000 is losing 8% inflation,
Yeah.
right?
Which is
Instead,
serious now. It's like
it,
a deal. It's a big deal now.
exactly, but it would be much better off if you had $10,000 in your mortgage, which is working at 5%. So in real terms, yeah, you're still losing 3%, but you're not losing 8%.
Right.
But the key to play the strategy is you have to be able to access that money. That is another problem with mortgages, that once you
Right.
put money in, you can't take it out.
Liquidity. Yeah.
But what I think about is like, how do you get people into a home faster so they can start earning home price appreciation? How do you pay off the loan faster? How do you refinance to always continuously maintain the lowest cost of capital? And then once you have equity, how do you make it liquid? And if you do all of those things in concert, that is a new paradigm of wealth, which is just underlying the American dream. It's sort of,
Yeah.
it sold you this dream, but then riddled it with you debt. And I'm
Mhm.
just thinking, how do you solve that debt issue and sort of let the dream
Yeah.
be real.
I'm so with you. I think I've thought this for a long time. I think debt is one of those things where we live in the country that's supposed to have freedom as its primary principle.
Right.
And financial burdens and debt is like that, plus doing a job you hate to buy things you don't want to impress people you don't need, is like the last two pieces of things that attack our freedom. It's like
Correct.
financial freedom is such a huge deal. And then that like life freedom, where
Right.
you actually feel like you're living the life you want to live. So liquidity is super interesting. We might have to do a part two because we've only got like 5 minutes left and I got another one after this. But like how, I mean, obviously this isn't like, this is my podcast, so it's not supposed to be super promotional, but I think you're a really solid dude and we vibed pretty quickly. And I think the thing you're doing here really is, I mean, my mission is build things that help people, and
Yeah.
you're doing exactly that. And you have like a good, solid, high value view on this. And you're building a product like for yourself. I mean, you did it for yourself first, and now you're just platformatizing it. So where do people go to like chat with you, sign up? Where's the product, the website? They can get more info, do a little more research, whatever.
Yeah. You just go to altgage.com, altgage.com, and it gives you a little overview of what we do. And then if you just hit sign up, you answer a few questions, we'll pull your mortgage information. And then, yeah, we use like Plaid and bank level encryption to allow you to start making these payments. But yeah, the word altgage, mortgage, I said, is an agreement until death. So altgage just means it's a different agreement.
Yeah, that's good. It's an alternative agreement.
Yeah.
I mean, the last thing, the one thing when I was signing up, yeah, the one of the big friction points I got, and you can probably address this right now, was, oh, is some stranger going to get all of my details about my finances that I've never met before. And so, yeah, you answered that.
I think there's some level of trust that I have to build over time with my brand. But I use like Amazon, right? People think, well, do I do things in house or do I outsource? And I help like one of the biggest oil and gas companies outsource their stuff to like Google and Amazon, because that's their job, is to protect data, right? So we encrypt everything, hash everything, store everything. But the second thing I did is,
Wait, so you don't see it. Like you don't see
no,
my finances.
no, we can see some portions, like like we can see the numbers, like the who owns your mortgage, what the number is. What we don't see is like your bank information, right? Because
Got it.
that gets really tricky. So for that, we use Plaid, and Plaid is like a universal
Yep.
banking API. So instead of providing your
Yep.
routing number and checking number, you use your username and password. Plaid connects to your checking account, and they say, "Yep, Altgage, Sean has authorized you to move money from bank account to the mortgage account." So we just connect two pipes from the bank to your mortgage, and we
Yeah.
can let the money move. So we don't actually mess with your
Yeah.
bank information, which is sort of, that's your money.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just like here's the total dollar value on the note. And then Plaid is, yeah, for everybody listening in at home here that doesn't know, Plaid is used by every investment app on the planet to do secure transactions and access the bank account. So that's like, yeah, you don't have to worry about that one. Or if you do, then everyone's in trouble. It's like a Chase Bank kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
They almost got bought. Who almost bought them? And then
I
it was
think
like
Visa,
5 billion bucks or
yeah, I
something.
think it was like Visa or somebody else, like one of the payment networks tried to buy them, and then
Yeah, it fell
antitrust
through.
blocked it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I trust blocked it because it was like, no, that's too much power in one company's
Well,
hands.
Visa already has all your data, right? Because every time you swipe the card, they have your data, and then Plaid has a lot of your data. So I think combining the two is, can be dangerous. Yeah.
Yeah, I read this. I get the newsletter. I don't know if you read this, but CFO Daily, and it was like maybe 3 weeks, a month ago, they interviewed the head of MasterCard and head of Visa
Okay.
to see if all of this like mumbo jumbo in the market about like everything's crashing and being destroyed is true. And they
Yeah.
were like, yeah, we looked at all the data at every income level, and yeah, pretty much everyone's spending the same amount that they have. And they're like, okay, cool, back to work. And so it's just like this media noise that everyone's just like, it's like fear spreads so rapidly. It's like, come on, guys, it's just like everyone just calm down. Just calm down. Go for a walk, like get some ice cream and just relax.
It's a lot of is the Fed's doing, right? Like they give it,
Yeah.
they take it, right? They keep the rates low, they pump money, everybody feels richer. They take the rate back up, and then all of a sudden, all this value in the stock market gets eviscerated, right? So I think, yeah, the Fed, I'm looking forward to the separation of state and money. Church and state was a big separation.
Yeah.
State and money, for the crypto folks, I know they're big into it, but I think there's some value in having like a non-sovereign form of money to
Hmm.
just so that it's not like so controlled, right? You can
Yeah.
plan out your future without somebody arbitrarily like creating a whole bunch of money and devaluing,
Yeah.
your money. Um,
Agreed. Agreed. It's because like the swings are so high. Like if it was algorithmic, the swings would just be like
yeah,
it wouldn't be as big a deal. I mean, it'd be like whatever.
I think the other thing is it also really distorts what is valuable and what is not, because when there's so much easy money floating around, every company was getting funded, right? And the
Yeah.
value is insane because there's no objective view of reality. If you actually had to save hard-earned dollars and invest your hard-earned dollars into a company, you would think a lot harder, right? And companies that didn't have merit would not, get easy access to capital. I'm totally, I totally believe in everybody should have access to credit and capital. But if you make it so easy that value is sort of like obscured by, easy access to money, there's a lot of waste that happens, So I don't know. It's just,
Yeah. The
that's me.
best the best guy I've read on this took me, I don't know, 40 years to find him, but the blog back on Blogger, if you can believe this, it's
Mm-hmm.
called Calafia Beach Pundit, and the URL is scottgranis.blogspot.com. I'll put it in the show notes. I'll put it here in the chat too. But
All right.
he's like an economist from the old school, like been around, retired now, but still writes. And like his take on M2 money supply and everything is like he's like the only one I'll listen to anymore about the economy. Like not even New York Times, not
Right.
NPR, not CNN, like just this one. Not even The Economist, like just Scott. That's it. So, anyways, cool, man. Like this was super fun. I got to get back in there and do some twiddling around with my account in there. But yeah, I think what you're doing is freaking phenomenal. And yeah, let's keep chatting, man. Like, let me know how things are going and if I can help in any way, you know.
Absolutely.
And then in terms of this, like, I don't know if there's anything that you don't feel comfortable sharing. Like, I'll just do slight edit and then I'll send
Sure.
you a link later tonight and then probably publish tomorrow morning.
Okay, great.
You can take a look at it later this evening if you want, and just let me know if there's anything that you're not comfortable with.
Super. I'll do that.
Okay.
Awesome.
Cool, dude. All
All right.
right, man.
Take care.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for
Yeah.
coming on. And yeah, let's have you back again. Let's talk about liquidity. Let's get
Yeah.
some check-ins over time and just see what's
Okay.
happening in the
Sounds
mortgage space.
sounds good, Sean.
Cool. All right,
Okay.
brother.
Bye.
Talk to you later.